Taeho sat alone in the command room of the Iron Will, watching the darkness of space through the wide front window. His ship was old, but strong. It had carried him and his crew across 100 worlds through storms of radiation and fields of floating rock. It had never failed them. He trusted it more than he trusted most living things. The Iron Will was not a warship. It was a rescue vessel, one of the few human ships allowed to travel freely through Galactic Union space. The Union was a collection of thousands of alien species spread across millions of stars. They had laws, councils, and endless debates about trade and territory. They also had a rule about Earth and its people. Humans were classified as Deathworlders. To the soft-bodied, gentle species of the Union, Earth was a nightmare, a planet of crushing gravity, where the air itself could burn lungs not made for it. A world of extreme heat and freezing cold, of violent storms and endless oceans. A place where life itself was a war, where creatures killed and ate each other just to survive another day. And the humans who came from this world were monsters in their eyes, strong enough to lift what 10 Lunari could not move, fast enough to chase down prey that had evolved for millions of years to run. Skin thick enough to survive cuts and falls that would kill most Union species. Eyes that could see in darkness, hearts that pumped through damage that should be fatal, and minds that refused to stop fighting even when all hope was gone. The Union tolerated humans. They did not trust them. Taeho understood this. He had spent 15 years in the military before he left to do something different. He was tired of being feared. He wanted to be useful. So he gathered a crew of people who felt the same way, bought an old ship, and began answering distress calls that no one else would take. His crew was small, 5 humans on a ship built for 20. But they were enough. Yuna was his medical officer. She was a woman of calm hands and sharp eyes, trained in both human and alien medicine. She could treat wounds that most doctors had never seen. She could work for 30 hours without sleep and still smile at a frightened patient. The aliens who met her were always surprised. They expected a predator. They found a healer. Minho was the engineer. He was quiet and careful, the kind of man who measured twice and cut once. He knew explosives better than anyone Taeho had ever met, but he preferred to build rather than destroy. He fixed things. He made broken machines work again, and when something needed to blow up, he made sure it blew up exactly the way it should. Sora was the pilot. She was the youngest of the crew, only 24 years old. But her reflexes were faster than anyone Taeho had seen in his years of service. She could fly through an asteroid field while eating breakfast. She could land on a platform the size of a dinner table in the middle of a hurricane. She was fearless, but not reckless. She knew her limits. She just happened to have very few of them. Do-Yun was the muscle. He was tall and broad, built like a wall, and he carried weapons that most humans would need a vehicle to move. He was Taeho's second in command and his oldest friend. They had served together in the military, and when Taeho left, Do-Hyun followed. He did not talk much, but when he spoke, people listened. These were the 5 who answered when no one else would. The signal came at midnight, ship time. It cut through the normal chatter of Union communication channels like a knife. A distress call, automated and repeating from a world called Velen Prime. Taeho knew the name. Velen Prime was the home of the Lunari, one of the older species in the Union. They were small and delicate, with silver skin and large, dark eyes. They were artists and philosophers, known for their music and their kindness. They had never fought a war. They did not believe in violence. The message was broken, full of static and gaps, but the words were clear enough. Please, anyone. We are dying. The Rakkar have come. They are killing us. Please, help us. The voice was old and afraid. It repeated the same words over and over, with small changes each time. Sometimes there were sounds in the background, explosions, screaming, the hum of weapons being fired. Taiho played the message 3 times. Then he called his crew to the command room. They gathered in silence. Yuna stood with her arms crossed, her face serious. Minho leaned against the wall, his tool belt still around his waist. Sora sat on the edge of a console, her legs swinging slowly. Do-hyun stood beside Taiho, his massive arms folded over his chest. "You all heard it," Taiho said. "The Lunari are under attack. The Rakar Dominion has invaded their world. They are asking for help." "And the Union?" Yuna asked. "The Union has declared political neutrality. They will not send ships. They will not send soldiers. They will do nothing." Silence filled the room. "The Rakar are mining the planet," Taiho continued. "There are rare minerals there, the kind that power starship engines. The Lunari are in the way, so the Rakar are removing them. Permanently." Minho spoke softly. "How many Rakar?" "Thousands, maybe tens of thousands. They have warships in orbit, ground forces on the surface, a full military occupation." "And we have 5 people and 1 ship," Sora said. There was no fear in her voice, just a statement of fact. Taiho nodded. "Yes, we do." Do-hyun unfolded his arms. "So what are we voting on?" Taiho looked at his crew, at these 4 people who had followed him across the galaxy. They had saved lives together on burning stations and frozen moons. They had faced pirates and plagues and storms that could tear a ship apart. They had never run from anything. "I am not ordering anyone to come," Taiho said. "This is not a mission, this is a choice. We will probably die. The Rakar are not pirates or bandits. They are soldiers, trained, organized, ruthless. We have no backup, no support, and no hope of reinforcement. If we go alone." He paused. "But there are people dying on that world. People who asked for help, and no one is answering." Yuna was the first to speak. "I did not become a doctor to watch people die from a safe distance." Minho nodded. "I can work with bad odds." Sora grinned. "I have always wanted to see what Rakar ships look like up close." Do-hyun put his hand on Taiho's shoulder. "You know my answer, brother." Taiho felt something warm in his chest. Pride, perhaps. Or maybe just love for these people who chose to stand beside him. "Then we go," he said. "Set course for Velen Prime. We leave in 10 minutes." The Iron Will turned toward the distant star, and the 5 Deathworlders flew toward a war that was not theirs, because someone had called for help, and they would answer. Velen Prime burned. Taiho saw it first through the ship's sensors, then through his own eyes as the Iron Will dropped out of faster-than-light travel. The planet hung in space like a wounded animal, smoke rising from its surface in great gray columns. Where there had once been green forests and silver cities, there was now only fire and ash. In orbit, Rakar warships moved slowly through the darkness. There were dozens of them, black and ugly, covered in weapons. They did not care about beauty. They cared only about power. "They have not seen us yet," Sora said from the pilot's seat. Her hands moved across the controls with the speed of thought. "We are small. They are looking for threats, not rescue ships." "Keep us small," Taiho said. "Take us down through the debris field on the dark side of the planet. No engines. Just drift. We cannot fight those ships, so we will not let them see us." The Iron Will slipped through the darkness like a ghost. Sora guided them between broken satellites and chunks of destroyed stations, the remains of the Lunari's orbital infrastructure. The Rakar had been thorough. They had killed everything in space before they started killing things on the ground. The descent through the atmosphere was rough. Anti-aircraft fire lit up the sky around them, bright streaks of plasma that could cut through metal like water through paper. Sora dodged and weaved, her reflexes working faster than the automated targeting systems. The ship shook and groaned, but it held together. They landed in a valley between 2 mountains, far from the main fighting. The ground was covered in gray ash that had once been a forest. Nothing moved. Tai-Ho opened the cargo door and stepped outside. The air smelled like burning plastic and something worse, something that had once been alive. He had smelled it before, on other worlds, in other wars. He never got used to it. "Sensors show a large group of life forms 3 kilometers north," Minho said, checking his handheld device. "Not Rakar. The heat signatures are too small. Probably Lunari." "Refugees," Yuna said. She was already pulling medical supplies from storage, loading them into a hover cart. "They will need help." The 5 humans walked through the dead forest, carrying weapons and medicine in equal measure. Do-Yun took the front, his heavy rifle ready. Tai-Ho walked beside him, scanning the horizon for threats. Behind them, Yuna pushed the medical cart, with Minho and Sora guarding the sides. They found the camp after an hour of walking. It was not really a camp. It was a collection of broken people huddled together in the ruins of what had once been a small town. There were thousands of them, maybe 10,000, all Lunari. Their silver skin was dull and dirty, their large eyes empty with shock. Children cried in their parents' arms. The elderly sat in silence, staring at nothing. The wounded lay on the ground, waiting for death. When the humans appeared, the Lunari reacted with terror. They screamed and ran. Mothers grabbed their children and fled. The few who could not move simply covered their eyes and waited to die. They had heard stories about Deathworlders. They knew what Earth creatures were capable of. To them, the arrival of 5 humans was just another form of death. Tai-Ho stopped walking. He raised his hands, showing his empty palms. "We are not here to hurt you," he said, his voice calm and clear. His translator device turned his words into the musical language of the Lunari. "We came because we heard your call for help. We are here to help." No one believed him. An old Lunari stepped forward. His name was Vel, and he was an elder, a leader of his people. His body was thin and bent, but his eyes still held intelligence. He had lived a long life and seen many things. But he had never seen a human who offered help instead of taking what they wanted. "Why?" Vel asked. His voice was weak but steady. "Why would Deathworlders help us? What do you want from us?" Tai-Ho lowered his hands. "Nothing. We want nothing. We came because someone asked for help and we were close enough to answer." Vel stared at him for a long time. Then he looked at Yuna, who was already kneeling beside a wounded child, her hands gentle and sure. He looked at Minho, who was examining a broken water purifier with professional interest. He looked at Sora and Do-Hyun, who stood guard with weapons ready, but pointed away from the refugees. "I do not understand," Vel said. "Our stories say that Deathworlders are monsters, that they kill for pleasure, that they feel no pity and no love." "Your stories are wrong," Tai-Ho said simply. "Some humans are monsters, but so are some Lunari, I think. We are not here because we are different from other humans. We are here because this is what we chose to do." He pointed at the wounded lying on the ground. "My doctor needs a place to work. Can you give her a building that has a roof?" Vel hesitated, then nodded. He led Yuna to a structure that had once been a school. The roof was damaged, but still standing. Inside, Yuna set up her equipment and began treating the wounded. The Lunari watched in amazement. Yuna worked without stopping, moving from patient to patient with incredible speed. She lifted wounded adults in her arms as if they weighed nothing at all. She set broken bones with hands that were strong enough to crush stone, yet gentle enough to comfort a frightened child. She did not need light to see, her human eyes adjusting to the darkness better than any Lunari could manage. A young Lunari girl watched everything. Her name was Kira, and she was perhaps 12 years old, though it was hard to tell with alien species. Her parents were dead, killed in the first attack. She had been alone for days, surviving on scraps and hiding from Rakar patrols. She should have been afraid of Yuna. Every Lunari was afraid of humans. But Kira saw something different in this woman. She saw kindness in eyes that could see through darkness. She saw care in hands that could break walls. "Can I help?" Kira asked in a small voice. Yuna looked at her and smiled. It was a warm smile, the kind that made people feel safe. "Yes," she said. "Hold this for me." She handed Kira a bandage, and from that moment, the young Lunari did not leave her side. Outside, Taiho and Do-Yun studied the terrain. They found a high point and looked toward the east, where smoke rose from a massive structure on the horizon. The Rakar Fortress. It was built around the main mining site, a ugly collection of metal and weapons. From there, the Rakar commander controlled the entire occupation. "Warlord Tor," Taiho said, reading the intelligence reports on his tablet. "He has been conquering worlds for 30 years. Never lost a battle. Never showed mercy to a defeated enemy." Do-Yun looked at the fortress, calculating distances and angles. "If we can destroy that, the supply lines collapse. The occupation falls apart." "Can we destroy it?" Do-Yun was silent for a moment. Then he said, "We can hurt it. We can hurt it badly. But destroy it? With 5 people?" Taiho looked at the fortress, then back at the refugee camp. He thought about the thousands of Lunari who were counting on them. He thought about Kira and all the children like her who had lost everything. "Then we hurt it," he said. "We hurt it until it breaks. Or until we do." Do-Hyun nodded. He did not smile, but there was something like satisfaction in his eyes. "I was hoping you would say that." They walked back to the camp as night fell over Velen Prime. Tomorrow, the real work would begin. Tonight, there were wounds to treat and plans to make. And somewhere in the fortress, Warlord Tor had no idea that death had come to his doorstep. Death from a world that should have never produced intelligent life. Death that walked on 2 legs and called itself human. The Rakar soldier died without making a sound. One moment he was standing guard at the supply depot, bored and tired after a long night shift. The next moment something moved in the darkness behind him. He felt a hand cover his mouth, strong enough to break his jaw if it wanted to. Then there was pain, brief and sharp, and then nothing at all. Do-Yun lowered the body to the ground and signaled to Minho. The engineer moved forward in silence, his boots making no noise on the metal floor. In his hands, he carried a small device, no larger than a coin. He placed it carefully against the fuel tank and pressed a button. A tiny red light blinked once, then went dark. They moved to the next tank, and the next, and the next. 20 minutes later, they were a kilometer away when the sky lit up behind them. The explosion was massive, a ball of orange fire that climbed into the night. The Rakar supply depot, which had contained enough fuel to power their vehicles for a month, was gone. This was the 3rd attack in 4 days. The first had been a communication tower. Sora had climbed the structure in complete darkness, moving up the metal frame with the ease of a creature born for climbing. Human ancestors had once lived in trees, and the instinct was still there, buried deep in muscle and bone. She reached the top in minutes, planted the explosives, and was gone before the first patrol came to investigate. When the tower fell, the Rakar lost their ability to coordinate forces across the eastern region. The second attack had been a patrol ambush, 12 Rakar soldiers walking in formation through a valley. Do-Yun and Taiho had taken positions on the high ground, waiting in the cold for hours without moving. The Rakar had walked directly into the kill zone, never knowing that death watched them from above. The fight lasted less than a minute. When it was over, all 12 Rakar were dead, and the humans had vanished into the mountains. Now the supply depot. 3 attacks, 3 victories, and the Rakar were starting to notice. In the fortress, Warlord Tor received the reports with growing anger. He was a massive creature, tall and heavily muscled, with thick scales that covered his body like armor. He had fought 100 battles and never felt fear. But these reports made him uneasy. "Humans," his lieutenant said, his voice nervous. "The soldiers are saying it is humans." Tor slammed his fist against the table, cracking the metal surface. "Humans are weak. Humans are soft. They cannot survive on a world like this without their machines and their shelters. How can 5 of them be doing this?" But the evidence was clear. The footprints at the attack sites were human. The weapons used were human. The pattern of the attacks matched human military tactics. And worst of all, no one ever saw them coming or going. They appeared from darkness, killed, and disappeared again. The soldiers began to talk. They whispered around campfires, their voices low and afraid. They said that humans could see in the dark like hunting animals. They said that humans could run for days without rest, chasing prey until it collapsed from exhaustion. They said that humans were immune to cold and heat, that they could survive wounds that would kill any Rakar. They said that humans were not really people at all. They were something else, something that came from a world that should not exist. Some soldiers began to desert. They slipped away at night, walking into the wilderness, preferring to take their chances with the wild than face the monsters that hunted them. Tor executed the ones he caught, making examples of them in front of the troops. But fear spread faster than bullets, and more disappeared each night. Meanwhile, Tai-Ho's crew continued their work. Min-Ho targeted the water supply. He poisoned one source with chemicals that would make the Rakar sick, but not kill them. He destroyed another with explosives. He contaminated a third with waste from the mining operations. Within a week, the Rakar forces were spending more time fighting illness than fighting enemies. Sora raided a vehicle depot. She drove in with a stolen Rakar transport, walked past guards who did not look twice at a vehicle with proper markings, and planted charges on 18 armored carriers. She was drinking water in the refugee camp when the explosions started, 15 kilometers away. Do-hyun fought a squad of Rakar soldiers hand-to-hand. He had been discovered during a scouting mission, surrounded by 9 warriors with weapons drawn. Any other species would have surrendered or died quickly. Do-hyun did neither. He moved faster than they could track, hit harder than they could believe, and shrugged off wounds that should have stopped him. He walked back to camp with 3 broken ribs, a bullet hole in his shoulder, and the weapons of 9 dead Rakar hanging from his belt. Yuna treated his wounds with practiced hands. She had seen worse. On Earth, humans had evolved to survive injuries that would kill most species. Their blood clotted quickly. Their immune systems were aggressive and effective. Their bones healed stronger at the breakpoints. Given time and care, humans could recover from damage that would permanently disable any Lunari. Kira watched the treatment with wide eyes. She had become Yuna's constant shadow, learning medicine and language in equal measure. She translated for the other Lunari, explaining that the humans were friends, that they could be trusted. Slowly, the refugees began to believe. Some of them even wanted to fight. A young Lunari named Sarah came to Tai-Ho one night. He was thin and scared, but there was anger in his eyes. His sister had been killed by Rakar soldiers. He wanted revenge. Tai-Ho looked at him for a long moment. Then he said, "I cannot make you a soldier. You are not built for war the way humans are, but I can teach you other things. How to hide, how to watch, how to carry messages without being caught, how to help without dying." Sarah agreed. He became the first of what would eventually be dozens of Lunari volunteers, a network of scouts and messengers that gave the humans eyes and ears across the region. They could not fight, but they could help, and that was enough. The campaign continued. Each night brought new attacks, new destruction, new fear for the Rakar forces. Tor sent larger patrols, but larger patrols were easier to spot and avoid. He set traps, but the humans never fell for them. He offered rewards for information, but no one talked. The Lunari, who had once been too afraid to speak, now found the courage to stay silent. One night, Taiho did something that became legend. He walked into a Rakar forward base alone. Just walked in, through the front entrance, past the guards. He was not hiding. He was not sneaking. He simply walked, as if he belonged there. The guards laughed at first. One human, unarmed, walking into a base with 50 soldiers. It was so absurd that they did not even raise their weapons. They thought he was crazy or lost. Then Taiho started killing. He moved through the base like a storm, fast, brutal, unstoppable. He broke bones with his hands. He dodged bullets by instinct. He used Rakar weapons against Rakar soldiers, discarding each one when it ran empty and picking up another. He was not superhuman. He was exactly human, which was terrifying enough. When it was over, he walked out the same way he had walked in, alone. Covered in blood that was not his own. Behind him, the base was silent. The story spread through both armies. The Lunari told it with hope in their voices. The Rakar told it with fear. And Warlord Tor, sitting in his fortress, made a decision. If these humans would not come to him, he would go to them. He would bring his entire army and wipe them from existence, along with every Lunari who had helped them. The final battle was coming, and the Deathworlders were ready to meet it. The night before the battle, Sora found Taiho standing alone on a cliff, looking at the stars. The air was cold, far below what any Lunari could survive without heavy clothing. Taiho wore only his standard uniform, his breath making small clouds in the darkness. The cold did not bother him. Humans had evolved to regulate their body temperature, to survive in conditions that would kill most species in hours. "Cannot sleep?" Sora asked, coming to stand beside him. "No," Taiho said. "Too much to think about." She nodded. Below them, the refugee camp was quiet. 10,000 Lunari were sleeping, trusting 5 humans to keep them safe. In the distance, fires burned where the Rakar army was making camp. Tomorrow, Warlord Tor would bring 3,000 soldiers and a dozen armored vehicles to crush them all. "Can I ask you something?" Sora said. "Of course." "Why do we do this? We are not Lunari. This is not our world. These are not our people. We could leave right now, fly away, and never look back. No one would blame us." Taiho was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was soft. "When I was a child, my grandmother told me a story. She said that long ago, humans were just animals like any other. We were not the strongest or the fastest. We had no claws, no fangs, no armor. We should have died out 100 times over." He paused, looking at the stars. "But we survived. We survived because we learned to work together. We survived because when one person was hurt, others helped them. When one person was hungry, others shared food. We became strong not because we were powerful alone, but because we were never alone." He turned to look at Sora. "That is what makes us human. Not our strength or our speed or our ability to survive. It is our choice to help each other, to protect those who cannot protect themselves, to answer when someone calls for help." Sora was silent for a moment. Then she smiled. "That is a good answer. It is my grandmother's answer. I just borrowed it." They stood together in the cold, watching the enemy campfires burn. Tomorrow would bring death, but tonight there was peace. The morning came too fast. Taiho had chosen the battlefield carefully. The throat of Velen was a narrow mountain pass, barely wide enough for 3 vehicles to travel side by side. High cliffs rose on both sides, covered in loose rock and ancient trees. It was the only path through the mountains, and Tor would have to use it to reach the refugee camp. The plan was simple but dangerous. Minho had spent the night planting explosives at the entrance of the pass. When the Rakkar army entered, he would collapse the passage behind them, trapping them in the narrow valley. Then the killing would begin. Taiho and Do-hyun took positions on the high ground, hidden among the rocks with their weapons ready. They had enough ammunition for a long fight, but not an unlimited one. They would have to make every shot count. Sora was in the Iron Will, circling high above the clouds, waiting for the signal to attack. The ship was not a warship, but it had weapons, and Sora knew how to use them. Yuna stayed at the refugee camp with Kira and a team of Lunari volunteers. Her job was to treat the wounded and keep the civilians safe. She did not carry a weapon, but she had a medical kit and the determination to save as many lives as possible. The Rakkar army appeared at dawn. They came in a long column, 3,000 soldiers marching in formation, their armor gleaming in the early light. Armored vehicles rolled between the infantry, their weapons pointing in all directions. At the center of the column was a massive command vehicle, heavily protected, flying the banner of Warlord Tor. Tor himself rode in that vehicle, watching the mountains with suspicious eyes. He was not a fool. He knew that the humans would not simply wait to be killed, but he had overwhelming numbers and superior firepower. Whatever trap they had planned, he would break through it with pure force. The army entered the pass. They marched for 5 minutes, then 10. The cliffs rose around them, blocking the light. The passage grew narrower, the vehicles forced to slow down and move in single file. Then Minho pressed the button. The explosion was massive. Half the mountainside came down at once, a wall of rock and dirt that buried the entrance of the pass under tons of debris. The column was cut in half. Hundreds of soldiers trapped on the wrong side of the collapse, unable to help their comrades. Inside the pass, panic erupted. Soldiers shouted and ran. Vehicles tried to turn around and crashed into each other. Officers screamed orders that no one could hear, and then the humans attacked. Taiho and Do-hyun opened fire from the high ground. Their rifles were designed for accuracy and power, each shot punching through Rakkar armor like paper. Soldiers fell in waves, their bodies tumbling down the rocky slopes. Sora brought the Iron Will screaming down from the clouds. She strafed the column with the ship's weapons, lines of plasma fire cutting through vehicles and infantry alike. Anti-aircraft fire reached up toward her, but she dodged it with movements that should have been impossible, the ship spinning and rolling like a living thing. Minho detonated more explosives, collapsing sections of the cliff onto the trapped army. Rocks the size of houses fell into the pass, crushing everything beneath them. The Rakkar tried to fight back. They were trained soldiers, veterans of 100 battles. They formed defensive positions and returned fire. Some of them even started climbing the cliffs, trying to reach the humans who were killing them. But humans were faster. Do-hyun met the first climbers with his bare hands, throwing them back down the cliff face with strength that seemed impossible. Taeho engaged a squad that had found a path to the high ground, fighting 3 soldiers at once and killing all of them. Minho pulled out a pistol and shot a Rakkar officer who had gotten too close, his aim perfect even under fire. The battle lasted for 2 hours. When it was over, the pass was filled with smoke and silence. More than 2,000 Rakkar soldiers were dead, their bodies scattered across the valley floor. The survivors had retreated in chaos, climbing over the rubble at the entrance and fleeing into the wilderness. Warlord Tor's command vehicle was a burning wreck. A direct hit from the Iron Will had torn through its armor, killing everyone inside. The warlord, who had never lost a battle, had finally met an enemy he could not defeat. But victory came with a cost. Minho was wounded, a piece of shrapnel in his leg. Do-hyun had taken 3 bullets and was bleeding badly. Sora's ship had been hit multiple times, smoke pouring from one of the engines. Taeho himself had a deep cut across his chest, the blood soaking through his uniform. They gathered at the entrance of the pass, 5 wounded humans surrounded by the evidence of their impossible victory. Below them, the Rakkar army was broken. Behind them, the refugees were safe. Sora laughed, a tired sound with no real humor in it. "We actually did it." "We did," Taiho agreed. "Now let's get back to camp before we bleed to death." They walked together through the smoke, supporting each other when their legs threatened to give out. The sun rose higher, burning away the clouds, and for the first time in weeks, the sky over Velen Prime was clear. In the refugee camp, the Lunari watched them come. They had heard the explosions, seen the fire and smoke. They had waited in terror, not knowing if their protectors would return. And then the humans appeared, bloody and broken but alive. The Lunari began to cheer. It was a strange sound, high and musical, nothing like the roar of a human crowd. But the meaning was the same: joy, relief, gratitude. Kira ran to meet them, throwing her arms around Yuna and crying into her shoulder. Yuna held her gently, stroking her silver hair, telling her that everything was going to be okay. The battle was over. The Deathworlders had won. But the story was not finished yet. The galaxy noticed. Footage from Velen Prime spread across every communication network in the Union. Cameras from crashed Rakar drones had captured the battle, showing 5 humans holding a mountain pass against thousands of soldiers. The images were grainy and broken, but clear enough to shock everyone who saw them. Species that had never met a human watched in disbelief. They saw Taiho walking through explosions as if they were rain. They saw Do Yun throwing Rakar soldiers like toys. They saw Sora's ship dancing through anti-aircraft fire with movements that seemed to break the laws of physics. They saw Minho setting explosives with calm precision while bullets flew around him. And they asked themselves, why? Why would 5 Deathworlders travel to a world that was not their own, fight an enemy that was not their enemy, and nearly die for people they had never met? The Galactic Union could not ignore the question. For years, they had maintained their policy of neutrality, letting conflicts burn without interference. But now, citizens across 1,000 worlds were demanding action. If 5 humans could stand against an army for strangers, why could the Union not do the same? Emergency sessions were called. Debates raged through council chambers. Diplomats who had never agreed on anything found common ground in their shame. 3 weeks after the battle, Union relief ships arrived at Velen Prime. They came by the hundreds, carrying food and medicine and building materials. Medical teams landed to help the wounded. Engineers began rebuilding the destroyed cities. Diplomats delivered formal condemnation to the Rakar Dominion, warning them that any return to Lunari space would be considered an act of war against the entire Union. The Rakar, already broken by their defeat in the pass, agreed to withdraw completely. They had lost their warlord, their army, and their reputation. The conquest was over. Velen Prime was free. In the refugee camp, now a center of recovery and hope, Elder Vel organized a ceremony to honor the humans who had saved his people. It was a simple event, held in the ruins of the school where Yuna had treated thousands of wounded Lunari. The walls were still scorched from fire, but someone had hung silver cloth from the ceiling, and flowers had been placed on every surface. The 5 humans stood together as Vel addressed the crowd. His voice was stronger now, his posture straighter. Hope had given him new life. "When I was young," Vel said, "my teachers told me about Deathworlders. They said that creatures from high-gravity, high-danger worlds were savage and cruel. They said that such beings could not understand peace, could not feel compassion, could not love anything except violence." He paused, looking at the humans, with eyes that had seen too much death and were now seeing something else entirely. "I believed those stories for most of my life. Even when these 5 humans first arrived, I expected them to take what they wanted and leave. I could not understand why they would help us. We had nothing to offer them. We are small and weak and fragile. We cannot fight or build or survive the way they can." He took a shaky breath. But I understand now. The stories were wrong. These humans did not come here because they are monsters. They came here because they are something else, something better. They came because they believed that strength should protect the weak, not crush them. They came because someone asked for help, and they had the power to answer. Vel walked forward and stood before Taiho. The human captain looked tired. His wounds had healed, but the exhaustion of the past weeks showed in his eyes. He had not slept more than a few hours at a time since arriving on Velen Prime. "Captain Taiho," Vel said, "my people owe you a debt we can never repay. You have given us back our world, our future, our hope. I ask you now, is there anything we can give you in return? Anything at all?" Taiho was quiet for a moment. Then he shook his head. "We did not come here for payment," he said. "We came because it was the right thing to do. That is all." Vel nodded slowly. "The stories said that Deathworlders cannot feel compassion. But I think the truth is different. I think you feel it more deeply than we do, because you know what it means to fight for survival. You know what it costs." He reached out and took Taiho's hand in both of his own. His fingers were thin and fragile against the human's rough skin. "Thank you," he said. "Thank you for everything." Taiho did not know what to say. He was not good with words, especially in moments like this, so he simply nodded and hoped that was enough. After the ceremony, the crew gathered near the Iron Will. The ship had been repaired by Lunari engineers, its hull patched and its engines rebuilt. It was ready to fly again. Kira stood with Yuna, holding the human woman's hand. She had grown so much in the past weeks. She had learned to treat wounds, to comfort the frightened, to be brave when everything seemed hopeless. She was not the same girl who had hidden in the ruins, waiting to die. "I want to come with you," Kira said. "I want to help people like you helped us." Yuna knelt down to look her in the eyes. "You will help people, but you will do it here, on your world, with your people. They need you more than we do. But what if you need help? What if you get hurt again?" Yuna smiled and reached into her bag. She pulled out a book, thick and heavy, printed on paper rather than stored digitally. It was her personal medical manual, the one she had carried since her days in training. She had translated it into the Lunari language herself, working late at night while the camp slept. "Take this," she said, placing the book in Kira's hands. "Learn everything in it. Become the best healer your people have ever seen. And when you save your first life, think of me." Kira hugged her tightly, tears streaming down her silver face. "I will never forget you," she whispered. "I know," Yuna said. "I will never forget you either." They held each other for a long moment. Then Yuna stood up and walked toward the ship, not looking back because she knew that if she did, she would never be able to leave. The crew boarded the Iron Will. Sora took her place at the pilot seat, her hands moving across the controls with familiar ease. Minho sat at the engineering station, checking systems and running diagnostics. Do-Yun secured the weapons locker, making sure everything was ready for their next mission. Taiho stood at the command console, looking out the window at the crowd of Lunari who had gathered to say goodbye. They were waving, all of them, their silver hands catching the light like stars. "Ready to go?" Sora asked. Before Taiho could answer, a new signal came through the communication system. Another distress call from a world called Keth Minor. Pirates had taken control of a space station, holding thousands of people hostage. The local authorities were powerless. Someone was asking for help. Taiho looked at his crew. Yuna was already strapping in. Minho was pulling up navigation charts. Do-Hyun was loading fresh ammunition. Sora had plotted a course before the message finished playing. No one needed to discuss it. No one needed to vote. "We are ready," Taiho said. "Set course for Keth Minor, maximum speed." The iron will lifted off, rising above the Silver City and the grateful crowd and the mountains where they had fought their impossible battle. It climbed through the atmosphere, breaking free of the planet's gravity, and turned toward the distant stars. Below, Kira watched until the ship was just a point of light, then nothing at all. She held Yuna's book to her chest and made a promise to herself. She would learn everything in those pages. She would become a healer. She would help people the way she had been helped. And maybe someday, when someone cried for help across the empty darkness of space, she would be the one to answer. The iron will jumped to faster-than-light speed, leaving Velen Prime behind. Inside, the 5 humans prepared for their next mission. They were tired and sore, and still healing from their wounds. But they did not hesitate. Because somewhere, on a world they had never seen, people were afraid and alone. And the Deathworlders would answer the call. They always did.